Welcome to Story Chats at Inspy Romance. I'm Elizabeth Madry, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Narelle Atkins.
And Valerie Comer.
Today we have Nancy Naigle with us to talk about her newest book, What Remains True. I'm going to read your bio real quick. Nancy Naigle is a USA Today best-selling author whose many contemporary novels include The Shell Collector and the Adams Grove, Boot Creek, and Christmas in Evergreen series. Several of her novels have been adapted to the television screen, airing on Hallmark Channel and Hallmark Movies and Mysteries, including the popular Christmas Joy and The Secret Ingredient. Nancy makes her home in Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us, Nancy.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to start off by having you tell us a little bit about what remains true. Give us your little blurb thing.
Okay. Well, What Remains True is a, kind of a second chance romance. And it's actually the second story I've set in the small town of Antler Creek. The first was Christmas Angels. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, but it was such an inviting little mountain town that I was dying to write there again. So when I had the chance to propose something new, I set it in Antler Creek. And it's just a beautiful mountain town that's got the barn quilt trail and, lots of small vendors and beautiful views and lots of quirky characters. So it's been fun writing in that town. And this is a new set of folks coming into Antler Creek. I've got a rodeo cowboy who is going for the gold this year, and he is laser focused on that goal. And then I've got a woman who is recently divorced, who's trying to get back on her feet, only stops through town to get gas, ends up stopping in Hardy House, the little linen store, and falls in love with it. And one thing goes to another. She ends up taking a little part-time job, moving into the bunkhouse and sticking around for what she thinks is going to be just a short time. And so she's not even upfront with people about what her situation is. And so they're all thinking she's just a little down on her luck, needing some help. And, really she's a COO who's doing quite well. And has a bet with her ex-husband that she can live off the alimony that she's paying him, and if she can't, then she'll increase his alimony. So lots of little twists and turns in the story, and things to get through. So it was a fun ride. It really good time for me, coming off of The Shell Collector, which was so much more emotional, and the book of my heart, absolutely, but this was a lot more fun to write.
Excellent. All right, Narelle, you're up with the first question.
I am indeed. So my first question is about barn quilts. So I'm an Aussie and I had never heard of barn quilts before and was Googling to work out what they were. So my questions are particularly for the Aussies that are listening and the Canadians who may or may not have barn quilts. Val, do you have barn quilts?
Yeah, in some areas we do. I do.
Okay,
I was
right.
familiar with the term, but that's okay. We do have a lot of international listeners too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and don't feel bad. My editors didn't know what they were either. My first covers came across with this, it was beautiful cover, but it had like this grandma's quilt across the chair. And I was like, that is not a barn quilt.
Yes.
So barn
they're
quilts,
very specific, aren't they?
Yes, they really are. They're very specific. They're painted on wood and they are attached to your farm buildings or somewhere on your property. And originally they were really more like landmarks to be able to get people to different farms or merchants, things like that. So they didn't have street signs. So it was like, when you see the, circle barn quilt with the cow on it, that's, come get your ground beef, whatever. But there are barn quilt tours all across America, and I don't know how many there are internationally, but for the Americans, there is a barn quilt trail website that you can go out and actually print out the ones that are on your route. So earlier this year, I had the great fortune to do the Get Your Motor Running reader event up in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, one of my readers took me for a drive up through Sturgeon Bay and Sisters Harbor, and Door County is just filled with them. And I think we took about 30 pictures of different barn quilts.
Oh, wow.
Through the area. It was beautiful. And it was so cute because, like you, Carmen wasn't really all that familiar with barn quilts before the book. And she was like, I found a barn quilt store. I'm like, wow, okay. I've never heard of that. This will be interesting. And when we got there, of course, it was the barn quilt store, not a barn quilt store. So and lots of pretty fabrics, and which was just fine with me because I love that kind of stuff. I am not a quilter. That is such a hard and beautiful craft that I have not been blessed with the ability to do. But I can sit down and paint a barn quilt, and so can my 80-year-old mama. And there's hardly any way to screw them up. So, it's a fun little practice. And for this book, I've done some little postcards to help people just kind of color and see what one would look like. Because the interesting thing is, you can take one barn quilt pattern, and we could all do them with different colors. They would all look different.
Oh,
It's
that's
really
cool.
very interesting. Yeah, so it's been a lot of fun. I'm
So
kind of
are they
addicted to it.
usually just like geometric, or do you try to imitate like a floral fabric in some of the squares or that sort of thing?
Yeah, usually they are geometric, but I have seen lately on some of the barn quilt Facebook groups where they've been emulating those floral and
Oh, wow.
geometric patterns in the paintings, which was really cool.
That would kick up the artistry a notch, I would
Yeah,
think.
and that would take me out of the loop on that one. Yeah.
I hear you.
I kind of like the
Yeah.
basic one, where, and so here's a little funny side story. My mama will be 80, and she has been doing these projects with us as well. Well, she's got narcolepsy, so she just falls asleep all the time. And so we were painting these little barn quilts, and we're doing a set of little 12 by 12s to change for the seasons under my mailbox. And so she's painting and then falls asleep. And of course, her paint's across the board. And so it's piece of cake. You just get some water, kind of dilute it down, wipe it off, and then just paint right over it. So, it's foolproof. Anybody can do it.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's completely new to me, so I really enjoyed that aspect.
Well,
of the story
welcome.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that interesting too, that that it was an art form, because I mean, kind of the way you're describing it right now, it sounds, so simple that your 80-year-old mom and your 5-year-old could do it.
Right.
And yet if they're selling them as an art form, then there's got to be more to it than what meets the eye.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And some of them are just drop dead gorgeous, and
How big do they come?
Oh, so I have seen them as large as 8 by 8. That's the biggest one I've seen. So 2 sheets of plywood together would be 8 by 8. The ones I did for my barn are 4 by 4s. But it's big. When you're painting 4 foot, it's hard to lean across that puppy. So I can't imagine doing 8 by 8,
In 2 pieces. That's your
Yes.
keyword.
But and it's
Yeah.
interesting though, because when you see some of those big ones, and I'm sure there are some that are bigger than 8 by 8 even, but some of them on those big, huge barns, you don't even realize how big they are, because in contrast to the building, it's just, the scale is misunderstood. Or
Very cool. All right, Valerie. I think
I found it really interesting that it's Mary Anna, right?
yes.
That she it's a role reversal. Usually you've got the rich guy, and the poor woman is like needs the alimony and whatever. So here we've got it flipped. She's the one who had the high powered job, still does, even though nobody in Antler Creek knows it.
Yes.
And he's the guy who's been, basically hanging on to her shirt tails and not really ever being gainfully employed. So that was a fun little twist on things right there. But what really caught my attention was that whole "can you live on this amount of money" thing. And I'm like, she's working on a part-time job she can't be making more than minimum wage. Like, how is this possibly working out for her to prove that she can live on the amount that she's giving him?
Right.
So
right.
where did the idea come from, and how did that pan out for you?
Well, the idea really came from, it was a bad divorce. He misbehaved. He deserved to get kicked to the curb, but I wanted her to be fair. In life, we see a lot of people go through things like that, and they were married, they were in love, they had families, whatever, and then things just go really ugly. And so in this story, I really, in my heart, even though it was an ugly situation and there was no way they were going to get back together, I did want there to be a sense of fairness and kindness involved. And so that's kind of how the bet came up in my mind, was when he starts belly aching about it, she's kind of like, oh, you can live on it. And then she's like, fine, if I can't live on it, then I'll increase it. So we're going to have this bet. And So that's how it came up. It was really all about being fair, and I guess because I'm kind of one of those people that always wants to be fair. It'd be nice if everybody else was.
So was he trying to live on what she actually earned as
No,
part-time?
yes, no. And you know what? That may have not been real clear in the story. So in his alimony amount that he got, her bet is that she won't spend more than his alimony amount. So she's taking the part-time job, but she's got money. I mean, she's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, it was basically what his alimony amount was. Yeah, you're right. It would have been impossible for him to live off of part-time money.
Because at first I'm reading along,
Especially-
I'm going, wait a minute, this is not very much money by
You
any.
are right. And you know what? That would not be fair for anyone.
I have worked retail part-time. I know.
Right.
You
Yeah.
could not live on that.
And it was a small town one even, so it's not going to be anything more than minimum wage. And yeah. So
Yeah, a
good
little
point.
retail store.
Excellent
Every time she bought something, I'm like, can you afford that?
point. I know. Don't mess up
Remember
the
your
bet. Exactly. Well, I'm glad
yeah,
you're all
she-
looking
she
out
and
for
I-
her.
Mariana and I had a few little discussions while I was reading. I'm like, come on, girl, this is how it works.
Very sensible when she bought the antique bed. She put it on a payment plan, the 3 equal
Yeah.
payments. She thought it through. I was very pleased with that. And it was nice that the owner was willing to sort of take it at good faith that she would make the payments. I mean, only in a small town, right?
That's right. Yes.
Around
Yeah.
where I live, they're like, you're not walking out of that till I have all of the cash
Yep.
in my hand,
Oh, yeah.
or something more legally binding than your word that you're going to make those payments.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
it's funny because I always write about, small towns, and I just moved to this new small town a year ago, and it's been so nice because I feel like I've landed in one of the towns I write. Everything's
Oh,
on
cool.
a handshake. People just come by to help you. I did kind of tease that I thought maybe I was getting ready to get kicked out of the neighborhood because someone came over and offered to mow all my pastures for me, and I was like, awesome. And then I was like, oh my gosh, is it because they're like, those pastures looked really bad? Why aren't you mowing them? But no, truly, I mean, they really are just doing things out of the kindness of their hearts. And it's just, it's lovely to know that there are still places like that, especially since I keep writing about them.
It can be
Right.
real.
It is for you.
You're not intentionally writing a fantasy novel.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it's good. I've proven to myself they're still there.
Excellent. All right, so we talked about Mariana a little bit, which leads us then to our hero, who is a professional bull rider, which I am not super familiar with the rodeo. I imagine there is a large population of people who are also not super familiar with rodeo. So tell us a little bit, like, why a bull rider.
That's how they talk after they get bunked off.
Exactly. Why the rodeo? What is it about bull riding and the rodeo that appeal? What made him the perfect hero with that?
Well, the rodeo, I've had a long love affair with the rodeo. My late husband and I used to go to Vegas for the National Final Rodeo every year, and I love the roping and love watching all the riding, although I hold my breath all 8 seconds. I'm glad the rides aren't longer because I would just pass out. But so I've just been a big fan of it for a long time. But the bull rider specifically was that they are such a rare breed of man, right? I mean, they're cowboys and they're tough and all that good stuff, but they also legit know that when they get on the back of that, a couple 1,000-pound bull, their life is at risk. They know it and they live for that. And so, yeah, I just felt like it was such a strong personality that it would be really interesting to see what would happen if he was caught up in some softer side things too, And so, yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. And I was married for a short time to an ex-bull rider. So I had some firsthand experience with that, kind of mentality. And, I don't say it's crazy. It's just very different. And they're definitely adrenaline junkies. They like the thrill of it all, but they're definitely in danger. If it weren't for those the rodeo clowns or the bullfighters, they would really be hurt a lot of the time. So it was interesting to be able to pull that man forward and give him a history. A granddaddy that owned the feed and seed store, and a little bit of a background, and that he knew how to bake, he's good in the kitchen. And so when they have kind of that first, I'm not a borrow a cup of sugar kind of guy, get together to bake a pie, and she knows nothing about it and he knows all about it. I just loved how that came together. And hey, it's not unlikely, a lot of guys, grow up at their mom's or grandma's apron strings, learning that stuff. And when they're bachelor in it, they've got to eat. So they know how to cook. So we need to give some credit where credit's due on that.
It was another fun little role reversal. There were several little twisted, not twisted in a negative sense, little role reversals that were really fun, because they just made it all that more interesting to have. I love the pies, and then maybe it's a little spoilery to mention, when the child shows up, we'll speak in more generic terms.
Okay.
But he has very good instincts there with a child as well, for all that he isn't sure that he does. Which again, we have the heroine Mariana who does not necessarily have those same instincts.
Right.
So I enjoyed that a lot.
Thank you. Yeah. It's a good twist in the book too, and definitely, throws a big old belly whop right into his plans. Here he is going for the gold buckle. That's the only thing he's focused on, and now everything in his life is going topsy turvy.
And you didn't just have him going for it, but you had reasons. It was for reasons.
Yes.
And sometimes we generic humankind get so fixated on a goal, and when we step back a minute, we go like, why did that even really matter? But he's got that.
Yes.
The why it really matters.
Yeah.
And he has a medical degree. So every time this is what I was thinking about. Every time he's getting on a ball, going out there, he's done anatomy in detail. He would know every million things that could go wrong if he has an accident as well. And so I think that mental toughness that he had, I really like that. I think you often see that in cowboy heroes as well.
Yes.
Is that, they're strong and they've got that ability to endure a lot of pain and hardship to achieve their goals, and that's very admirable.
Yeah, absolutely. And when doing some research around bull riders, and then the doctors, the sports therapists that are there on the ground helping these guys when things go wrong, there were a few of these sports doctors that used to be bull riders or bronc riders. And so those guys just really intrigued me, and I was just reading more and more and more about them, and just how versatile they were, and their private lives, and they really just intrigued me, which really helped build out Adam's character after kind of seeing it for real in those articles.
That mental toughness, the thing that leaps immediately to mind is after the one bull ride where he's basically been gored, and then like the next day he's like, oh yeah, I popped a stitch, I'm fine. And it's like, dude. Like, if that were me, I would be in bed, not moving, and there would be people waiting on me for at least a week, possibly 3.
Oh yeah. Well, my late husband, he was not a bull rider or anything like that, but he was a goat rancher. That's what he did. He raised goats, and we had 500 breeding does on the farm, and he did that full time. But he was that cowboy tough kind of guy. Kind of lived by that cowboy code. And there was just nothing that man couldn't do by himself. Like he'd be rigging up the tractor to do stuff, but he was out there one day working the animals, and, he had chutes and stuff, but he went to grab one of the does, and she had, long horns. And when he went like this and grabbed it, her horn went straight through his hand all the way out the other side. And so he had to I know. So
Oh.
I'm in the kitchen, just like making dinner, something normal. And he comes in and he always would carry these little like hand towels that had the farm logo on them. And so he came in and he's got that towel wrapped around his hand. I'm like, is something wrong? And he's like, yeah, you're going to need to take me to the hospital. And I'm like, what's going on? And then he tells me what happened. And then he's like, it stopped bleeding. I think I'm okay. And wouldn't go to the hospital. So, I mean, yeah, it's just that kind of stuff where they're just so rugged and tough and they're just like, what had to happen, and wasn't mad at the goat. I've been like, she'd have been dinner.
Yes.
Man her.
Bring her in. There's a pot big enough.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. Goat chops for everyone. But yeah, no. But yeah, I mean, those guys do. They just have a real mental toughness about them that, yeah, I'm with you, girl. I would be huddled up. Bring me some juice. Chicken soup.
I can't move. It hurts too much.
And it was throbbing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, Valerie or Narelle, do you have any final thoughts? Those are the questions we had sussed out already ahead of time.
They're great questions. Thank y'all.
Final thoughts?
I was intrigued by, there's a scene where there's a young child riding a sheep. Is that something that you threw into the story for fun, or is that something that actually really happens?
Oh,
It's
really
a real
happens.
thing.
It's a real thing.
It's a real
yes,
thing?
ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Mutton busting.
It's called mutton busting, and the kids get on the back of that, oily sheep. And they've got their fingers pulled into that wool, and they go riding off. And the cowboys, are right there to pull them off so they don't get hurt or anything. But I will tell you, and I was sharing this before, was I've seen mutton busting forever, and I laugh. It is hysterical to watch. Well, when you watch a child that do it, it's totally different. And so writing it for this book, was from that kind of perspective of, okay, so if this child and you're watching them running on the back of this sheep fast across the field, and they're aiming for the fence, how are you going to feel? And also kind of that Adam's moment, where his parents have pretty much, that relationship is destroyed because they're so upset by his choice in careers, that he gets a little small dose of, okay, now I kind of understand where my parents are coming from. This is horrifying, scary beyond belief when you love somebody that's out there. And I thought that was a really big and pivotal moment for him. Because sometimes it's easy to get lost in, our own goals or focus or reasons for things that we forget, how that domino effect on other people around us.
So it's mutton busting, is it?
Mutton
okay, I've learned another
busting.
new thing from your book.
Everything you never needed to know by Nancy Naigle.
Well, I'm a city girl, so a lot of the country things are new to me. So I learn a lot when I read.
Good deal.
Particularly cowboy books.
It's not that there's a shortage of sheep in Australia.
No,
there's
true.
not.
Did you ride them?
Well, if you talk about riding on a sheep's back in Australia, see, I've got an economics degree. So that's an economic term for our economy. We talk about the 1950s and 60s where Australia rode on the sheep's back. That's how we made money. So, I mean, that's what comes straight to mind is I'm thinking of the economy. I'm not thinking about small children riding on sheep. But that's just the weird Narelle.
Oh, doesn't it?
I love it.
That's
I think you
funny.
should rewrite my story from the Australian point of view.
There you go.
Give her a historical in the 1950s. There you go.
Yes, I love it.
Oh my goodness.
So Nancy and I had mentioned we were talking about mutton busting before we started, and she did assure me that they wear helmets. So that was good because I was concerned about that, and also like little vests, safety vests. So that's good. It's maybe slightly less dangerous than it sounds, but it still sounds terrifying to me.
And I mean, as a mom, any mom would be just, gutted to watch her child zip across there because those sheep go fast and they leap. I mean, they will just leap.
Still, it's got to be safer than BMX, don't you think?
Yeah, probably.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How fast do sheep go?
Well, and on the BMX, you have some control. I mean, you do. You have zero control over a sheep.
This is true. This is true.
And that's where it's different to horse riding because with horses you've got control as well.
Right. Exactly.
Sort of.
Sort of. Yeah, I was going to say not the horses I've ridden, but that might be a
That
me
could have
problem.
been an operator error. Yeah.
Yeah, probably a me problem, not a horse problem.
Too funny.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh
goodness.
my goodness.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, we're close to our time. So actually that worked out well. Nancy, would you tell everyone where they can find you and your books?
Yes, you can find me at nancynaigle.com. My books are everywhere you want to buy them. Every e-tailer and most box stores are carrying them. And I have a new book coming out in December called The Wedding Ranch.
Oh.
And if you haven't seen the cover, it is just lush and beautiful. And I have a feeling it comes out December 10th in that sea of red and green and white covers. This
Oh, nice.
fresh turquoise with a beautiful barn on it. Because the Wedding Ranch is a wedding venue.
fun.
I think it's going to be a really fresh cover. So I hope it gets a lot of attention.
That sounds great. Now, is that in Antler Creek too, or are
It
we
is
going
not.
somewhere else? It is
We're
not.
going
Okay.
somewhere new. Yeah.
Excellent.
Are you going back to Antler Creek?
I will be going back to Antler Creek. I have gotten so many reviews of folks wanting to know about Tara's house. They
Mhm.
think Chrissy and Grady need to get married.
Yeah.
They want to know more about Adam and Zan and Mariana. So yeah, I'm definitely going to go back. I love writing in that little town. It's become a real place for me. I want to build it.
That's excellent. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you all have enjoyed listening to Nancy. I was pleased when you just said your last name that I did get it right. My phonics did not fail me. So that's exciting. I meant to ask ahead of time and I did not. So phew. We would love to hear from you if you've read Nancy's book or if you now want to. Let us know in the comments on YouTube or on our Facebook page. And we will look forward to seeing you again next week. In the meantime, don't forget to fall in love with a good book. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.